Hi, I'm Jaclyn.
And I'm Courtney, and this is Caffeinated Crimes.
Welcome back. It is, I believe, fall when you guys are hearing this. We record a little bit ahead of time, so maybe it's not quite fall, but if it's not, fall is coming. So that is exciting. I know everyone is looking forward to that, looking forward to some cooler temperatures, and maybe we'll be able to do some fun outdoor fallsy things that were all canceled last year, but right now some things are still open. But then, of course, with Delta, things are, who knows at this point. I don't know. I just want to go apple picking. That's all, guys. So
yeah, it's been crazy, and again, this might be super outdated by the time you hear it, but Hurricane Ida is coming straight for Louisiana right now. It's, at last I saw, 1 mile per hour away from being a Category 5. It's supposed to be really bad, so hopefully by some chance it just doesn't do a lot of destruction, but not likely. I'm sure when you're hearing this you'll already know everything, but we just want to keep everyone in Louisiana in our thoughts, because that is so horrific and probably so traumatizing, especially for people who were there for Katrina and being like, here's another Katrina. I remember how hard it was, really, really tough. So you guys are definitely in our thoughts. But yeah.
Yeah, that is super sad and super scary. I mean, evacuating from a hurricane, not knowing what you're going to come back to, if anything, is terrifying. So like Courtney said, hopefully that will just kind of go off course and just kind of dissolve into the ocean where no one and nothing is harmed. We also want to remember the 13 U.S. service people who were killed in Afghanistan this week. You guys know that we record a few weeks ahead of time, so when you guys are hearing this, obviously it happened a few weeks ago, and hopefully nothing major has happened since then. But we do want to remember them as well. Yeah, we're just starting and ending this episode on a bummer.
Yeah.
Courtney, you have anything happy to talk about?
What is happy? I'm just kidding. I don't know. Guys. Things have been bleak lately. Things have not been great lately.
In true Caffeinated Crimes fashion, I had a lot of caffeine before we started recording today. If you guys have listened to the Patreon bonus this month, which may or may not come before or after this, Courtney's shaking her head.
It'll come out 2 weeks after this episode.
Okay, well, I'll just talk about it in both places. But there's a point where you have that great caffeine laser focus, and then you just a little bit over, and then you're scatterbrained, So I just went a little bit over, but maybe since this is our second episode of this recording session, maybe I'll be back down to laser focus. I don't know. I did have the new Starbucks caramel apple macchiato, which was not good. Don't recommend. I was very disappointed. I drank it all because we don't waste coffee around here, but it's not very good.
Yeah, a lot of their new drinks lately just apparently have just not been it. So I think they just need to stop. Just stick to your pumpkin spice lattes and just call it.
Yep. Just keep your classics, and maybe go back to some of the older classics that people liked that you got rid of for some reason, instead of trying your new, stuff that nobody likes.
Bring back the cheesecake brownie, because that was very good. Did you ever have their cheesecake brownie? It was really good. And then they discontinued it for some reason and brought in stupid ass cake pops. No offense to cake pops, but not as good as a cheesecake brownie.
Courtney's no offense to cake pops, but cake pops suck. Her face looks so disgusted right now.
I get cake pops, they're cute, but come on, just eat a slice of cake. At this point.
See, so what I do is I'm I'll get a cake pop so I can have just a little something sweet and not a whole slice of cake, but then I get 2 of them, so it doesn't really work.
Well, and one of them is already so many calories, and I'm just I can't even indulge. Can you at least make it under 100 calories? Can't even indulge here.
Oh gosh. Okay, well, now that we can get back into some more sad updates before we get into
some of them
this
are kind of happy-ish.
True.
They're sad, but have Happy-ish.
Little hope at the end. Yeah, true.
Emphasis on the ish.
So Lois Duncan, who is the person who wrote I Know What You Did Last Summer, which I did not realize this, but her daughter was murdered in 1989, and just this week someone confessed to her murder. So that is, again, not really happy, but it's closure for a family that has waited, almost 30 years, over 30 years. I'm really bad at math, guys. Sorry. Has waited, over 30 years for this information, so at least now they can kind of have that closure, so that's good.
Yeah, it was very sad. I read that like she kind of stopped because she would write like teen books, kind of like, I Know What You Did Last Summer. There was a few other books that she wrote that are pretty well known, but after she would write like children's books about like women in like life-threatening situations and stuff, but really kind of just stopped writing to like try and figure out who like murdered her daughter. And unfortunately she did die in like 2016, so she's not alive for this update, but I am glad for her siblings, like everyone else, to like know who finally did it.
Yeah,
it's just so heartbreaking.
Yeah, definitely.
And speaking of murderers, Robert F. Kennedy's assassin, Sharon, don't know if I'm saying that right, but he's a murderer, so he was recommended for release. So he was 24 years old when he killed Robert F. Kennedy in 1968. And he's been in prison for 53 years now, and he did have the death sentence, but it was eventually commuted to life. So this decision's not final. Parole staff can still review it and like be like, no, this isn't happening. But he does seem to show remorse. He says he was drunk at the time. He doesn't remember the killing. He's gotten sober. So obviously if this is true and this was like, whatever, then hopefully he'll be released and be able to be contributing to society in a meaningful way somehow. But yeah, so we'll give you an update if in those 90 days something changes, if he stays in prison, released. But I do think Robert F. Kennedy's assassination is one we should cover semi-soon.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. A few weeks ago, we also mentioned the family in California that was found dead on a hiking trail. So it was a couple, their 1-year-old daughter, and their dog. They have had an autopsy. There are no obvious signs of physical trauma. They were suspecting that it was toxic algae, which is common in the water in that area. But that did come back negative, so they have ruled that out. Unfortunately, with a case like this, you kind of have to test for all toxins individually. It's not like you can just do a single test that tells you everything. You have to know what to even test for. So at this time, they're slowly ruling out things, but still haven't found a cause of death. But we just wanted to give that little update that we do have so far, and we will let you guys know when we have more on that.
Yeah, that one is super scary. Of just I do wonder if there was something in the air that they breathed in or whatever. It's very, very eerie.
Yeah, definitely. It's, yeah.
Another update we do have, we talked about the murder in Piedmont Park of Katie Janice and her dog. So since we talked about it, I think they did release pictures of a lot of people in the area. They don't really think any of them are suspects, but just want to see who did you see, what happened, did you know whatever. And there were a lot of people around. So and it was officially confirmed that there is some message that was carved into her torso by the killer. So obviously police are not releasing that because they're we don't want to give it away. This is something only the killer would know. And they are going to do an autopsy on the dog. They do believe he would have tried to protect his owner. So they're thinking there could be DNA on his nails, on his paws, in his mouth, something that might reveal. But at the moment, that's still unsolved, which is also terrifying.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about how Atlanta's had several weird unsolved murders in the last few weeks, and yeah, that one is just another one of those that's just so bizarre. And especially now that we have this little bit of information about something carved in her chest, it's was this personal, was this someone with mental illness, what,
and you had
what
enough time
here?
in this public place to carve a message. The article I was reading said it was reminiscent of a murder that had happened like years before in Atlanta, where the killer had marked like a V in the person's forehead. But that person is in jail, so they're like, it can't be him. But like, what if there's something going on? Like, is he inspired by this? Is there's some like weird connection? It's just super crazy.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well, Courtney, unless you have other updates, I think
I do. I have a correction. Okay. I have a correction.
Yes.
I misspoke in a previous episode. Apparently, I've been combining 2 songs in my head. I didn't realize this until the other day, and I was like singing it in my head, and I was like, that is 100% 2 separate songs. So I said I quoted, "No one man should have all that power," and I said it was Kendrick Lamar. That is not correct. It is Kanye West. So sorry, Kanye West and Kendrick Lamar, that I disrespected you like that. I'll try to be better and not get my people confused, because I do it all the time. Too much stuff in this head of mine.
I know how that goes. Sometimes you just combine everything together and nothing comes out right. It is what it is.
So basically in my head, I was combining that lyric and the Backstreet Freestyle in my head. So I was going like straight in. I guess that beat somehow. But yeah, so I was going, no one man should have all that power. And then I was also singing, so I can fuck the world for 24 hours. And those are 2 songs. Those are 2 separate songs. In my head, they were one. So
Courtney's just making her own remixes and doesn't even realize it.
I'm going to be famous one day, guys.
This is the new wave of music. You just combine, 2 of someone else's songs and create your own song, and voila, there you go.
There you go.
All right, so Courtney, any more updates?
Nope, that is it. I'm good
now. So today we're going to tell you about a man named John List. So our sources were the Forensic Files episode called The List Murders, and All That's Interesting article, Murderpedia, and an ABC News article.
And I do want to say with this, last podcast on the left did a very long 2-part series on John List that will probably have significantly more information. I tried to listen, but they're a good podcast, but for trying to research, I couldn't do it. There was a little too off topic sometimes. But if you want probably a deeper dive, go ahead and go listen to them. Not that they need my little tiny ass shout out, but shout out to them.
Yes. So John Emil List was born on September 17th, 1925 in Bay City, Michigan. His parents were German and were very strict, and he was an only child. His mother was described as domineering and overprotective, which I feel like we hear a lot with people who turn out the way that John List did. He did continue to be a devout Lutheran as an adult, and he even taught Sunday school. He enlisted in the Army and served in World War II, and he was later given an ROTC commission as Army Lieutenant. He went to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. In Ann Arbor.
You know what that makes me think of? That makes me think of that girl on Dancing with the Stars when her name's like Carrie Ann Arbor, and you're just always just like Carrie, and you just like start saying syllables and hope it's right. That's me.
Exactly. You just kind of go until the end and something comes out, and everyone knows what you mean, so it's okay. So at that place in that city, he got a bachelor's in business administration and a master's in accounting. So John, unfortunately, was lacking in social skills. He was often described as cold and aloof, dull, just really didn't have many friends. He had a history of losing jobs, just was not really a people person. He had trouble keeping relationships in the corporate world. So again, just doesn't really have that those soft skills that everyone's looking for these days. But John List did work very hard as an accountant, and he eventually married his wife Helen. They had 3 children, Patricia, John, and Frederick, and in 1965 he moved to Westfield, New Jersey with his wife, children, and his mother. He was the vice president and comptroller, which is a management level position responsible for supervising the quality of accounting and financial reporting of an organization. He was those things for a nearby bank. And his family did buy a mansion in Westfield. So this mansion had 19 rooms, including a ballroom, marble fireplaces, and a Tiffany skylight. They attended church each week, and by 1971, he lost his job again. He was having trouble finding another job, and he didn't want to tell his family about their lost income. So instead of telling them that he lost his job, he did the logical thing, which was to get on the train every morning and read newspapers and pretend that he was going to work. He would also secretly take money out of his mother's bank account to pay the mortgage, and he refused to go on welfare because he thought it would be an embarrassment in the community and would violate the morals of self-sufficiency that he had learned growing up. Which I feel like is a very common belief, but don't have that belief, guys. That's what it's there for. I mean, you pay into it these years, things happen. It's there to be used. I'm
just laughing because he's like, oh, this is against my morals, and then what happens later? It's like, oh, just go on welfare, buddy.
Yeah, that welfare would have been a lot better. But John believed that a man should provide for his family, and so eventually he just did not know what to do, so he felt that he only had one option left, which, as we said, he thought was better than welfare. So on November 9th, 1971, John List murdered his wife, children, and mother. So Patricia was 16, John was 15, and Frederick was 13, and his mother Agnes was 85. So he shot each of his family members one by one. That morning, he sent the children off to school, and he shot Helen in their kitchen while she was having her morning coffee. He then went up to the third floor of their mansion, kissed his mother on the head, and then shot her as well. He then drug Helen's body to the ballroom and cleaned up the blood so that the children wouldn't be suspicious when they got home. He then went to the post office to stop their mail, went to the bank to cash out his mother's savings bond, and when he got home, he made several calls to family saying that his family had gone to North Carolina to see Helen's sick mother, and he was planning to follow soon. So setting up this,
like reasoning why people won't be around.
Exactly. So then he sat down and ate lunch, and he later said in an interview, "I was hungry, that's just the way it is." Okay. Yeah, I mean, murdering my whole family just really gives me an appetite too there, John.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So Patricia then came home from school, and he shot her as well, and then he shot Frederick, and he made himself a sandwich, closed out all of his bank accounts, and then went to the high school soccer game to cheer on his last son, John. He gave John a ride home and then shot him in the chest, and he ended up unloading both guns on his final son. And again, somehow in John's mind, this completely cruel murder was better than welfare and would be less of an embarrassment to the community and more in line with his moral compass somehow than welfare. Okay. So John laid their bodies on top of sleeping bags in the ballroom and covered their faces, and he then composed a note to their pastor because he thought that he would understand. He feared that his family would turn away from God if they were poor, and that this was the only way to make sure they would go to heaven. But I'm pretty sure God doesn't hate poor people.
Yeah.
So after this, he cleaned up the house, and he used scissors to remove himself from every photo in the mansion, which is very odd.
They can't find me. I don't know what I look like.
I didn't exist. I don't know. I mean, I've, removed family members from photos in my house, but I would never remove myself. I don't quite get that.
Why don't just, take the photos down in general? Just to remove them in general. Don't go through the problem of, scissors. Just take them down.
Who's going to be coming in looking at these photos of your family? I don't...
Yeah.
Like you said, I never existed. It wasn't me. I didn't do it. So John then canceled all deliveries and contacted his children's schools to let their teachers know that they would be on vacation for a few weeks. He then turned on the lights and the radio and left religious hymns playing in the house's empty rooms. So he went to a lot of trouble here to kind of set up, don't be looking for anything suspicious, It wasn't very in the moment, basically. So he then went to sleep in the mansion and left the next day. So he spent an entire night with his whole dead family in this house.
Yeah, he literally ate lunch, ate dinner, went to sleep in a house with his dead family. That is cold.
How? Which, I mean, I guess it is a mansion. You can just stay on the west wing and leave all of them on the east wing and you don't even know it. No, that's not okay. So after this, John List would not be seen again for 18 years. So a month passed before neighbors began to suspect that something was wrong in the mansion. They were curious why the lights were always on, but the windows were always empty. Like, something just seemed off here. So police officers entered the home on December 7th, 1971, through an unlocked window. So the house was very cold, and they heard organ music being played through the intercom system, which just gives me the heebie-jeebies reading this. Many officers said that it almost sounded like funeral-type music, that obviously it's very disturbing, and they did notice a faint smell of decomposition. So they went into the ballroom where they found the bodies of Helen, Patricia, John, and Frederick on a bloody sleeping bag. The officers noticed a blood trail that went from the kitchen into the ballroom, so it indicated that they had been killed in the kitchen and then dragged into the ballroom. And in the kitchen, police found blood-soaked bags of paper towels and a bloody mop, so clearly he had tried to clean up the murders.
Why aren't you going to take the trash out is my thing. Like,
Right?
you're doing all this and you can't even take the trash out? Put the trash can by the thing to let him pick it up? Nothing.
And it's like you made somewhat of an attempt to clean it up, and then you left all of your cleaning supplies and still a bloody sleeping bag, and it doesn't quite make sense.
It really doesn't.
So then upstairs on the 3rd floor, they found Alma's body. She had been shot in the head, and in the den, police found 2 guns and a letter addressed to the local pastor. It was 5 pages long, and like we said, John, was writing about trying to save his family. He said that he knew that what he had done was wrong. He said his mother was in the hallway near the attic because she was too heavy to move. And so the letter wasn't just a confession, but also an explanation. He said that his family were the ones in the ballroom and he had killed them out of mercy. He thought that they were turning away from God and would eventually stop attending church. Patricia had recently expressed interest in an acting career, which John did not approve of. He thought it was immoral, and he believed that he had killed them to save their souls. He also believed that if he killed them, that they would go to heaven, but if he killed himself, he would not. So he decided that he would not kill himself and would hope that he could get forgiveness later for his sins.
Like, the amount of little loopholes you're jumping through to, like, justify this, it's just, like, it's just crazy to me how you can be like, yeah, this is right. This is right. Like
you're trying real hard to make all this fit there, John. So in the letter, he did give some details of the murder. He discussed how it took his oldest son, John, the longest to die because he struggled the most. And he also described his last moments with his family and how he said some prayers for them from a hymn book because he felt it was the least he could do. That's the least you could do? I'm pretty sure the least you could do would be not murdering your whole fucking family. That could probably be the least you could do.
And I would be so pissed. Like, if I'm murdered and I'm left in a ballroom next to all my other family members, and you leave the lights on and you leave blaring music, let me rest in peace.
Right?
Don't be putting funeral-style organ music through the intercom. Like, that's just rude.
Like, if you're trying to get haunted, like, you're doing it. Like, you're doing all the things to get haunted.
And, like, I get he wanted the house to look occupied, but it is suspicious for, like, the lights to be on all night long. Like, people are going to notice that and be like, that's weird. Like, leave one light on or something.
Yeah, and who plays, the same music nonstop, too. Like,
yeah.
So, 2 days later, the FBI found John's car parked at Kennedy International Airport in New York City. The date on the parking ticket was November 10th, but there was no evidence that John had actually taken a flight. So, the problem is John now had a 1-month head start on the police. So, obviously, he could be anywhere in the entire world.
Literally anywhere.
So, police did issue a nationwide warrant for John List as a top priority. It was sent to every FBI field office, post office, law enforcement agencies across the country, like widespread, trying to get the information out there. A ballistics report confirmed that the 2 guns in John's desk were the murder weapons, and autopsies revealed that they had been shot in the head. Police had 2 big theories about where John was. So they believed he had either committed suicide after completing the murders, or he was living in the Midwest somewhere. So there would be different sightings of him all around, but none that really, came to anything
substantial. Like,
yeah.
It's like people today
guys.
being like, I saw Tupac. And it's like, no, you didn't. You didn't.
Yeah. Elvis died a long time ago, guys. He's not alive somewhere. I'm sorry.
And the thing is, too, when you look at the picture or the sketch of John List, like, he doesn't have anything that's too defining. There's nothing about him
Yeah.
that really is like, eventually there will be as he gets older and stuff, but it's not like it's like, oh, I would recognize that guy anywhere because, I don't know, he has like 3 eyes or something.
It's just your average middle-aged white man, you know?
Yeah,
Like...
that's what it is. So the mansion in New Jersey burned down a few months after the murders, and authorities never found the cause of this fire, and a new house was built on the property years later. And they also discovered during this that there was the glass ceiling in the ballroom that was a Tiffany and Company original. So as we mentioned, that Tiffany skylight, it was actually worth about $100,000 at the time, and this likely would have covered most of their debts. Literally, if you would have just sold... Honestly, if you would have just sold your mansion in general, you could probably live a long time. But just this skylight alone.
The ceiling. Yeah.
So, John List was able to run from authorities for 18 years, like we said before. Police did try year after year to keep the case in the newspapers and the media. Like, they really wanted to solve this case because there is a murderer just out there somewhere. Mm-hmm. So they decided they desperately wanted to get the List case on America's Most Wanted. So they thought this could be the best way to get nationwide news, and maybe someone saw him, and like, especially like America's Most Wanted was almost like, it was almost like Family Feud. Like, people would sit down to like watch it. You know what I mean? Like, as a family, you were like, I'm gonna watch like America's Most Wanted rather than just like watching the news or something. Mm-hmm. In 1989, detectives were able to convince them, even though the case was almost 2 decades old at this point. There was a bit of an issue, though. So at the end of every episode, they did air a photo of the wanted person. So viewers, they want to see a picture. They want to be like, do I know this person? Have I seen this person? But the most recent picture of John List was taken years before the murder. So we're talking like 25 years from the date. He's going to look different.
Yeah, you might have a little bit of aging in that time.
Yeah, so they did bring in an expert forensic artist named Frank Bender to create a physical bust of John List, as Bender would have imagined how he would have aged. So Frank Bender is a renowned forensic reconstruction artist, and he does specialize in creating busts to help police track down aging fugitives or to identify decomposed bodies. So this field's kind of part art, part science, and maybe a lot of intuition, just kind of hoping you can figure it out. So when going from like skull to face, he's actually able to use a chart that specializes in like measuring facial tissue thickness, it's a big word, based on race, age, and gender. So again, it's not like he's just like slapping some skin on, like he's literally measuring how thick their facial tissue should be. Mm-hmm. In addition to this, he'll look at the skull and try to find various differences between like this skull and other skulls so he can accurately get this mold. Frank Bender likes to use clay to form his sculptures, and on the Forensic Files episode, it actually showed a reconstruction he did of a skull that was found in a field, and it's almost identical to the missing girl. So, I mean, it was like spot on, and she was identified from Bender's bust. So, wow. He's very good at this. Like, he knows what he's doing. Mm-hmm. So John List would be a little different since he didn't have like John List's skull. So he's just going to have to figure out how would John List age. Mm-hmm. So Frank was given this picture of him from 1971, and he only had like the old pictures to try to figure out like what he would look like all these years later. So Frank explains like, they use computers a lot, but when aging people, it just doesn't have the same touch. He said a lot of times it'll just add a few wrinkles because they're 8 years older. But that's not always accurate. I mean, look at Jennifer Aniston. She's looking better now than she did back then. So
very true.
If you take better care of yourself, you may look better 8 years later than you did 8 years before. So it's not, they just kind of add wrinkles and they're like, here you go, that's what they look like. And so for John List, Frank Bender wanted to get like a psychological profile. So Frank said when he's working with aging fugitive, he wants to get inside their mind. He almost wants to become like that person. Like, how would this person think, act, all of that. And he did get assistance from forensic psychologist Richard Walter. So they worked together to predict how he would age, and they looked through like newspapers and photographs to try and analyze him. So Frank decided to sculpt the corners of his mouth going downwards. He believed he'd be carrying around a lot of anxiety from the murders. So Walter didn't think it was from guilt, but just anxiety over the fear of being caught. So that he would just kind of look grouchy all the time.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Didn't sound like he was that happy before the murders either. So Bender also took genetics into account. So he tried to look at pictures of John's parents to see how they aged. And he decided to add these like sagging jowls and a receding hairline. And List also had a surgical scar behind his right ear. So Bender actually researched how this scar would age and added that in too. So again, it is a lot of science. It's very impressive. So he completed the mold and he decided to add paint for the skin and hair. So they put him in a suit and tie because that's what both Walter and Bender thought he'd most likely be wearing majority of the time. He is an accountant and he takes himself very seriously, so he'd probably try to be in a suit all the time. The bust still wasn't complete though. They did want to add glasses. So Walter was certain that List would not be wearing contacts. In the forensic files, it was like they didn't think he was vain enough to be wearing contacts. And I was like, oh, that's kind of a weird. I didn't really think that people wearing contacts versus glasses was that much of like a vain, quote unquote, thing. But this was a few years ago. So contacts have come a long way.
Yeah, I was thinking, you know, at this point it was probably like kind of a big deal to wear contacts versus glasses. And then like contacts kind of became like more mainstream, and now glasses are like more back in style, you know? So
yeah,
it's kind of an interesting like evolution. But yeah, I can see how at this time, you know, contacts would be more of like a big deal. Like,
and
you would
probably
have to, like,
a lot of money and like literally just for the looks of it. So yeah.
Like, I remember my mom telling me that she wore contacts, I think when I was young. I mean, like, it was late 80s, early 90s. You know, she started wearing contacts, and it was like they were like, not like glass, but like a thick, like solid plastic. They weren't like flexible. So they weren't like as comfortable, and you had to like put them in this like cleaning machine overnight. Like, it wasn't just like saline solution. Like, it was like a very complicated procedure. And then she said when I came along, she was like, I'm not dealing with that. And then she just went back to glasses and then never went back to contacts again. But I remember like they were very different then, you know.
Yeah, so anyway, it probably would have been
sorry for that aside.
Way more of a process, and they're like, he does not care enough about his looks to do that. So Bender predicted he'd have a different style of glasses too. So Bender predicted he'd be wearing like glasses with thick dark frames to hide the fact that he was a failure. So they thought even like down to like he's gonna be wearing these really thick glasses to like hide his face because he's a fucking failure. So he also thought he'd be wearing these to make himself look more important than he really was, like these like big glasses and I'm so smart. And he got this conclusion from Walter's profile. So Bender literally looked through dozens and dozens of pairs of used glasses until he found the pair that he was like, I think this is it. And spoiler alert, this bust was spot on, down to the glasses of what John looked like at that time. So they did air it on America's Most Wanted on May 21st, 1989, and they estimated about 22 million people saw Bender's sculpture. It's a lot of people. So, of course, tips start to pour in, and in Denver, Colorado, a family recognized the face they were seeing on TV. So Wanda Flannery and her daughter were watching, and they saw a striking resemblance between John List and a former neighbor. So besides looks, it also added up that he was an accountant, a Lutheran, and had a scar behind his ear. So it wasn't even just like, oh, it looks like him. It's like all these details are adding up. And really what the clincher for them was the glasses and the jowls. So he put those like huge sagging jowls. Like that was like, they were like, this is him. That's exactly what he looks like. They knew that their former neighbor, who was going by Robert Clark, was John List and decided to call it in. So Wanda told the FBI her former neighbor recently moved to Richmond, Virginia, and used the name Bob Clark. So, going back to Richmond.
always coming back to Richmond. I feel like we've Richmond and Knoxville, we've had a lot of occurrences recently in our episodes.
Yeah, and also Westfield, New Jersey is actually where my future father-in-law grew up, so it was like all these connections. So authorities went to Robert Clark's house and talked to his wife, Dolores Miller, whom he'd met at a church gathering, and she had no clue. So he had told her his first wife had died of cancer and he had no children. Which, I mean, like, why would you expect him to be lying about that? It's like...
Yeah, right.
So they did end up arresting Robert Clark at the accounting office he worked at in Richmond. And he said, "I'm not John List, I'm Robert Clark." But he had the scar behind his ear, and his fingerprints matched fingerprints on file from when John had purchased a gun permit a month before the murders. Again, he did not think this through. Mm-hmm. And again, John was wearing the exact same style of glasses that Frank had put on his sculpture. So it was like identical here. And a lot of investigators say that it was almost like Frank had been looking at John List when he did the sculpture. Like I said, it was like spot on. They were like, it was almost identical. So it turned out that after John List fled New Jersey, he moved to Colorado and started using the alias Robert Clark. And when he moved to Colorado, he started working as a hotel fry cook and later as an accountant for H&R Block, which I'm like, if you could work as a cook, you could have done that in New Jersey and gotten money instead of killing your family. Anyway.
He thought he was important. He wanted that important comptroller job, so,
Yep. So it did work well, and he kept it when he moved to Richmond, Virginia. And Richard Walterd's psychological profile predicted almost every aspect of his fugitive flight too. So it is pretty cool how like psychology and this like forensic artist like come together and how like spot on it was. Mm-hmm. As we said, they had arrested John List, and it was only 9 days after his story aired on America's Most Wanted. So that's how effective it was.
Yeah.
So at his trial in 1990, defense lawyers argued that John suffered from PTSD from his military service in World War II and Korea. And expert psychologists believed rather that List was going through a midlife crisis. And as the prosecution pointed out, it's still no excuse for murdering 5 people. Nope. So it's like, no, this is not a great defense. So the jury did find John guilty, and a judge sentenced him to 5 life terms in a New Jersey prison. In a 3-sentence statement to the court, he said that he was sorry for the tragedy that happened in 1971. He did not mention his wife, mother, or children.
I also love how these murderers, like, use passive terminology, like the tragedy that happened, not the tragedy that I caused, the murders that I committed, nope, it's something that happened to me. I don't know how it came to be.
Yeah. So in an interview in 2002 with Connie Chung, John said that he did not kill himself after killing his family because, again, he said he thought it would prevent him from going to heaven. And in the interview, he said, "I feel when we get to heaven, we won't worry about those earthly things. They'll either have forgiven me or won't realize, what happened. I'm sure that if we recognize each other, that we'll like each other's company just as we did here when times were better."
Good God.
Yeah, so... Thankfully, John List did die in prison in 2008 at the age of 82. I do have, as I said, my future father-in-law, Chuck, did grow up in Westfield, and apparently the lot where John List's house was a local makeout spot. Like, before another house was built, like, people would drive their cars up and be like a local makeout spot, which is pretty weird.
Nope. Don't like that at all.
Which I was talking to him when I went on vacation, and I was like, trying to talk, and it is so weird because him and my future mother-in-law Sheila both grew up in New Jersey, and like their parents like worked in New Jersey and New York, and like Sheila was just being like, yeah, like my mom was around during Son of Sam and talking about that, and I'm like, it's so weird to like know people who were like around this time of like all that. And like I think it's maybe when they lived in New Jersey or Connecticut, I think it was Sean, maybe Ryan, I don't know, one of the boys' friends lived in a house that used to be like a mass murderer too. Like just so much stuff that they like have in their brains.
They have a lot of connections there.
That I want to pick really bad, and I'm trying not to be creepy. But yeah, but that is the story. of the murderer and idiot John List, and the death of Agnes List, Helen List, Patricia, John, and Frederick List. So,
yeah, like, this man is just, wow. I don't even have any other words.
It is crazy, and I do recommend watching the Forensic Files episode, like, to see the bust and him making the bust and, like, Frank Bender talking. It was very interesting. But yeah, just the craziest series of, like, events and all of it. Like,
and the way that he, ties religion into all of this, and really seems like he has no remorse and he didn't do anything wrong, and then to go on and live a full double life with a new wife who has no idea, and you don't have any, of your issues or whatever you want to call it, like you, for all intents and purposes, live a normal life after that. Like, how do you do that? How do you, like, separate those two in your brain and
to later be like, we'll meet each other in heaven and maybe they'll forgive me and maybe we'll have fun. And I'm like, what are you what are you saying? Like, you're not getting there, buddy. I'm sorry. You're not getting there. I know God forgives, but you ain't sorry.
Like, you really need to, what is it? You have to repent, and you have to, show that you're not showing that, bud.
Mm-mm. You're not. So, John List is probably burning in hell right now, so.
Yep. Hope you're enjoying that. Hopefully you were, if you believe in the version of hell that is like your own personal hell, hopefully he's in a cold mansion with funeral music playing for all of eternity, because that would be fitting.
Yeah, it really would.
So, Courtney, all of that being said, what is your perk of the week?
Okay, my perk of the week is going to be another books I have read recently that are really good roundup. So I just finished Malibu Rising by Taylor Jenkins Reid and People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. Both were so good. I really enjoyed them, especially the People We Meet on Vacation. I destroyed through that book. I was like, this is so good. It was like a bit of a romance, but it was so good, and I'd seen it recommended a lot, and it definitely lived up. So if you're looking for something to read a little lighter, I suggest that one. The Malibu Rising was so good too. I love Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I love how she kind of does the Sarah Dessen, where she brings characters from other books together and stuff. So that was really fun to be like, oh, this book I previously read, they all live in the same universe kind of thing. So that was really fun. So those are two books I've read recently that were really, really good that I would like to recommend to everyone.
I like that. Yes, we love a good book recommendation, and obviously, as you know, Courtney, I will be exchanging books with you next time I see you to borrow those, and I have some for you to borrow. So
I know I'm looking through my piles, okay, which one am I gonna read next? Because I still have a lot that I've borrowed from you and Tiffany. So I'm like, okay, which one's next here? But yeah, that is my perk of the week. Jaclyn, what is your perk of the week?
I had a different perk of the week, but yours made me switch gears, so I'm going to change my perk of the week. I'm also going to do a book. Yeah, just on the fly here. So I, a few days ago, finished Golden Girl by Ellen Hildebrand, and it was very, very good. It didn't get great reviews, which I kind of felt offended on her behalf, but that's another story. But when I was reading the reviews, and I'm like, what's wrong with you people? Because she typically does more beach reads, and so this one was a little heavier, so I guess people are like, oh, I didn't come here for that. But I'm like, well, if you read the synopsis, you would see that
few though have been a bit heavier.
Yeah.
Also, one of her older books made me weep like a baby. I'm pretty sure I told you don't ever read this book. It made me weep.
Oh, I cried at the end of this one. I was holding Millie and she was asleep, and I was trying so hard to not sob because it would wake her up. But it was very, very good. It is about a mother that dies, so obviously it was personal to me, but it was very uplifting, I guess. I mean, I don't really know the right word. It was very sad, but very heartwarming at the same time. But it was very, very good. And of course it is in my stack to give you next time I see you. But highly recommend that one if you need a little, something that's just heartwarming and kind of has some hope and a little, you know.
Yeah, her books in general are really good. Her last one I liked, but I wasn't the biggest fan of, mostly because there was, a lot of people have said this too, there was like an affair that she was kind of trying to glamorize a bit, and so it kind of just rubbed me the wrong way a little bit. But all of her books I still enjoy and I still read, and she released an ebook as a follow-up, and of course I'm going to buy it and read it, like of course I am. But yeah, her books are really good. I think it's Lost in Paradise series is really good.
I don't think I've read
I don't know if that's the right terminology. It's a trilogy. It's really good. Anyway.
So yeah, if you guys want to tell us about all of your books and the books that you recommend or don't recommend, or if you want to argue with us on the books that we like that you don't, we're always down for a book discussion. You can do so on Instagram at Caffeinated Crimes Pod, on Twitter at Caff Crimes Pod, that's CAFF Crimes Pod. We are on Facebook at Caffeinated Crimes Podcast. If you you can email us at caffeinatedcrimespod@gmail.com. And if you feel so inclined, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/caffeinatedcrimes, where we have monthly bonus episodes. So you get to hear a new one every month. And then, of course, when you sign up, you get the backlog of all the bonus episodes that we've done. So if you just want to binge like 14 more episodes all of a sudden, you can do that. You can join our Discord and have a little chat with us about books or John List or other pieces of shit or whatever you want to talk about.
Talk about your day. Talk about anything else. We'll talk about anything. Yeah. If you are a Patreon member, please remember to please join that. I talked about it in the bonus, but I'm going to say it again here in case for some reason you don't listen to the bonuses. Then... yeah, join that Discord. I sent you an email.
And if you guys don't listen to the bonuses because it's complicated or you forget to go into Patreon to listen, there's a link to an RSS feed in there that you can like copy into whatever podcast player you normally use to get all of those bonus episodes. Okay, yeah. Well, don't use Spotify. But
just I've already spent hours and hours trying to research how to get an RSS feed on Spotify. You can't do it, so it's just gonna let you know.
Okay, well, my bad. If you listen to our episode on other podcast players, then you can do that as well. Or Patreon does have an app that might make it a little bit easier to listen there versus having to go to a browser. I don't know, troubleshoot with us. Let us know if you guys are not listening to the bonuses, why that is, and maybe we can help you. But yeah, all kinds of other fun goodies that you can check out on patreon.com/caffeinatedcrimes.
And we're still doing our Apple review giveaway. We're getting very, very close to 50. So once we do that, we'll pick someone who left a name that we can understand and find. And we'll choose one person to get a pin, a sticker, and a $10 gift card to the coffee shop of your choice. It's a win-win here because if you know a lot of people with iPhones, you can put as many reviews in as you want. Go ahead and do that. Just leave a little comment, give us 5 stars, put your name or screenshot it before you submit it and send it to us, just whatever. It would be greatly appreciated if we can get there and hopefully get some more listeners. But in the meantime, go have a cup of coffee.
And don't commit a crime.